Like so many of you, I began attending this commemoration with parents and other family members. With each passing year, there are fewer and fewer familiar faces. We honor their memory and the memory of all survivors who have passed away, leaving us to carry on their great legacy. It is vital to know that the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, will always be at the forefront of this important observance. On behalf of the museum and its many partner organizations, we are grateful for you joining us today. Together, we will remember and honor our Kedoshim who perished in the Holocaust. Before our program begins, let me thank all the volunteers here today, as well as the staff of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, especially Rita Josephson, for their efforts in putting together this commemoration. In addition, I would like to thank Rabbi Joshua Davidson, Mark Heitlinger, and the staff of Temple Emmanuel for their warm hospitality. Once again, silence your phones if you haven't already. Please rise for the national anthems. Shana Grossman, daughter of Ziona and Holocaust survivor Simone Grossman, will lead us in the Star-Spangled Banner and Hatikva, accompanied by Alyssa Greengrass on the flute, granddaughter of Holocaust survivors Stephanie and Charles Greengrass, and on the keyboard, Zalman Mlotek, son of Holocaust survivor Joseph Mlotek.
Fire Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ann Oster. I am the daughter and daughter-in-law of Holocaust survivors. My late parents, Doris and Salman Weisletter, survived in Siberia, and my late in-laws, Bernard and Miriam Ostrowiecki, survived in the Lodz ghetto and various concentration camps. We have been gathering here for 29 years, and it is truly an honor to be with you again today and to share this commemoration with you and your families. Our observance is complemented by many participants from the third generation. This event now enjoys the support of 26 organizations that help us inspire new generations. It is inspiring to see our group of partners grow each year. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael S. Glickman, President and CEO of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. No applause, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Glickman, and I am the President and CEO of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I want to thank you all for joining us today and making our annual gathering of remembrance the largest Holocaust commemoration event in the country. I also want to welcome our live stream viewers and thank you for being with us online from around the world. I want to recognize Rita Lerner and Ann Oster, the many elected officials and dignitaries, our board of trustees, our partner organizations, and the many people who made today possible. Commemorations like the annual Gathering of Remembrance are powerful because they demand our presence, our attention, and most of all, our togetherness. They challenge us to think about how we carry not only our personal individual histories, but also the history of our people. The weight of this history can sometimes feel like a burden, but when that burden is shared, it becomes an important lesson in what we mean to each other. We owe it to our people, ourselves, and our children to insist that when we mourn those who were killed and comfort those who suffered, we tell their story with precision, accuracy, the utmost respect for their human dignity. We will not contribute to an already enormous loss by allowing ignorance and prejudice today to deny the complex lives that were brutally cut short or changed forever. We will not forget. 20 years ago, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, was dedicated by survivors. Since then, we have welcomed more than 2 million people through our doors, emerged as the primary resource in New York for teaching and learning about the Holocaust, and taken our place as the third largest Holocaust museum in the world. Survivors remain the core and driving force of our community. As a living memorial, one of our sacred mandates is to magnify their voices and preserve their testimonies. When a survivor tells her story, she reasserts the very humanity and dignity that the Nazis attempted to destroy. We offer as many opportunities as possible for survivors to speak to school groups and members of the public. This year, we went a step further in envisioning how we might continue to teach generations to come. In doing this, we rediscovered our visitors' deep need to learn from survivors and the range of vital questions they will ask when given the chance. How did you come to terms with the fact that your sister was murdered? When did you tell your children about your experiences during the Holocaust? Do you think it's possible for people to forgive? Have you forgiven? Are you still afraid today? What do you want your grandchildren's children to know about you? Why do you tell your story? Questions like these have echoed through the halls of the museum for the past several months, as people have come from around the world to speak to a virtual Eva Schloss and virtual Pinchas Gutter. In our pilot installation of New Dimensions in Testimony, created by USC Shoah Foundation, recordings of Eva and Pinchas have taken up residence on large screens ready to share their stories. It is an incredible experience. You stand before one of these survivors, ask your question into a microphone, and receive an almost instantaneous answer. This is made possible not only by cutting-edge technology, but also the unrelenting generosity of Eva and Pincus themselves, each of whom spent days under a dome of cameras pre-recording answers to more than 1,500 questions. There is no way to exactly replicate the experience of hearing from a survivor in person. But when it comes to Holocaust education and remembrance, it is our responsibility to use all of the resources we have. When the museum envisioned how to present this experience, we did it to start exploring the future of Holocaust education. We wound up getting a glimpse of the quality of remembrance that will be demanded of us in the years to come, the ways in which we will have to shoulder and transmit this history. In order to fully experience Eva and Pincus, you have to take some responsibility for yourselves and your own learning. You have to decide what you need to hear and step up to the mic. You have to formulate and ask difficult questions. Sometimes you have to reflect and rephrase. You may turn to the other people in the room, strangers, fellow students of history, and invite them to discuss what you all have just learned. This experience has prompted us to reconsider the ways in which we communicate, not just with virtual representations, but with our fellow human beings. Experiencing this installation has made me, personally, study the kinds of questions people bring with them, cherish the survivors still with us, and consider the courage and sacrifice required of survivors as they relive painful memories in order to share them, to teach us. I want to take a moment to recognize all of the survivors in our audience today and their families. Would every survivor who is with us today, would you please stand to be recognized? We're going to allow clapping on this one. Thank you for your presence in our community and for all the ways in which you encourage the children among us to envision a world worthy of their futures. Never forget is a call to action and a call to teaching. It's a call that the museum, our museum, answers every day. At the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, our teaching extends far beyond our own children and grandchildren. Young people of all backgrounds enter our doors to learn about the Holocaust and to remember. We defy the Nazis' attempts to dehumanize and destroy the Jewish people. We remember the history of the Holocaust as a history of individuals, and this in itself is an act of resistance. Thank you for being here today and for undertaking the difficult and crucial work of remembering.
Thank you, Michael. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Senior Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, Rabbi Joshua Davidson, to deliver the invocation.
Good afternoon. Let me add my welcome to all of you, to Ambassador Danny Dayan and all those dignitaries from our city and around the world who are joining us. I'd ask you to please rise for a moment of prayer. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of those who came before us, as we assemble once again for this Yom HaShoah gathering, the oldest and largest in our city, we stand again in awe and humility before you, before those survivors whose heroism inspires us, and before their children and grandchildren. We pledge never to forget the horrors done them, done us. Throughout this majestic sanctuary echoes our sacred calling to open the world's eyes to racism and intolerance in all their forms, and to anti-Semitism wherever it remains, at home, among America's intersectional left and alt-right, and abroad on the streets of Gothenburg, Amsterdam, Berlin, and Paris, and in Eastern European revisionist history. Dear God, may this day of mourning and remembrance be a day that exalts the human spirit. As the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto rose up 75 years ago against their oppressors, may we raise up at this hour your vision of the world as it ought to be. As Martin Luther King Jr., murdered 50 years ago Wednesday, refused to accept despair as the final response to history, may we refuse to accept the idea that the isness of humanity's present nature makes us morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts us, the task of building a world of compassion and justice and peace. Yihul ratzonim refi v'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'goali. May these words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, and may our commitments this day bring honor to those whose memories we cherish now and will forevermore. Amen. Please be seated.
Today, we will hear from Amanda Lansiter from our third generation. Amanda's grandparents, Gina and Henry, are survivors of the Holocaust. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Lansiter.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Lansiter, and I am the granddaughter of two survivors from Brody, Poland, Henry and Gina Lansiter. I am so fortunate to say that my grandmother is here with us today at the annual gathering of Remembrance. When I think about how I viewed my grandmother when I was younger, I think about the things that anyone would think of when they think of a grandparent. She baked chocolate chip cookies for us on a regular basis. She would take care of me when I was sick. She made us hand-crocheted blankets to keep us warm. But early on, I could tell that there was something different about her from my friends' grandparents, and even different from my mother's Brooklyn-born parents. I knew from an early age that my grandmother was born in Europe, and that most of her friends were also born there. I knew that she had an older brother who disappeared when she was young, and that she married my grandfather when they were still living in Poland. I knew that my aunt was born in Germany, but that my father was born here in the United States a year after they moved here. As I got older, more and more of the pieces came together, and I learned that she was a Holocaust survivor. I'm sure that I knew she was a survivor before I really understood what that meant. By the age of 14, my grandmother was completely alone in the world. She had already lost her parents and her older brother. She was faced with making decisions in an environment that she had no context to understand. When she speaks about the choices that she made, or the gut instinct that caused her to walk down one street and not another, I'm in awe of her. Her strength and resilience are astounding. When my grandmother speaks to groups about her experiences, she always mentions her father's last words to her: to live to tell what happened so that her family would not die in vain. I know she's taken these words to heart. She's spoken to thousands of students. She's involved in numerous Holocaust-related organizations, including the New Jersey State Commission on Holocaust Education, and her testimony's been recorded by multiple archives. I have seen the way that she pushes herself to continue to speak to students, even as she is in physical and emotional pain. I've also seen how in recent years the pain seems to be greater and lasts longer. I see how it's getting harder and harder for her to do this, as much as she wants to and needs to. As a member of the third generation, a grandchild of survivors, I feel a special obligation to communicate the lessons of the Holocaust to future generations. I feel my grandmother's legacy running through my veins. I know that's why when I was in college, I became an intern at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and eventually I became a full-time staff member, where I'm currently the senior manager for curriculum and instruction in the museum's education department. But teaching Holocaust history is not my only obligation. I feel a special responsibility to teach my own family's history and experiences, to be a messenger for my grandmother in her place when she's no longer able to do so. In 2016, I became part of a program at the museum called Heritage Testimonies for children and grandchildren of survivors. We created presentations about our relatives using recorded testimony and our own voices to transmit their stories to students and adults. I've been giving tours of the museum for a decade now, and I can do it without letting my emotions overtake me. I found that when I speak about my grandmother, however, I can't help but feel my throat tighten with emotion and my eyes fill with unshed tears. Each time I speak to a group about her experiences, I think about them in a way I haven't thought about them before. It's given me greater admiration for her than I already had, because I know if it's this difficult for me to talk about it, I can't even imagine how hard it is for her, or how hard it is for the other survivors who speak at the museum on a regular basis. Despite the difficulty of speaking about it, I know that I need to continue to transmit her message, because one day she won't be able to do it herself. I too have taken her father's words to heart, to tell what happened so that they did not die in vain. The students I've spoken to have no personal connection to the Holocaust in the way that I do. Their visit to the museum may be their very first time even learning about it. I've been so moved at how strongly they respond to my grandmother's story through me. It makes me hopeful that my generation, the third generation, will be able to continue our relatives' legacies to make sure that their stories survive. I feel so fortunate to have met so many other strong, resilient survivors like my grandmother through my work at the museum. I carry their stories with me. They are the reason I continue to do the work that I do, and I hope that the work that I do honors them. At this time in history, it is essential to transmit their experiences to the next generations, to the ones who may never meet a survivor in person. We have seen people try to deny what happened, to say that it is exaggerated or that it never occurred. It's dangerous, and we need to work against it through telling these stories. We need to ensure that people know the history of the Holocaust, of our families, so that we can truly realize the message of never again.
Thank you, Amanda. That was beautifully delivered, and I'm sure your grandmother is very proud of you today. Your message we need to carry on to future generations. I'm now proud to introduce Toby Levy, a survivor of the Holocaust, to address us today.
Hello, everyone. How can I compete with what she just said? No way. She took all the words out of my mouth. Can everybody hear me? My name is Toby Levy. I represent the Museum of Jewish Heritage. I'm fortunate enough to be there, part of the bigger group, of the bigger picture, to teach children and guide. I first started as a guide. Slowly, they taught me to how to talk, and I learned to talk. I never spoke much. I will tell you now how I got there in 5-10 minutes. I was born the year Hitler came to power. Small town named Chodorów in Poland. Life was okay. I had two wonderful parents, my father, Moses, and my mother, Celia. My father was a soldier in the First World War for the Germans, wore a German uniform. My father had a store. He was a merchant. My grandparents, great-parents, the whole family lived in town. Probably no more than between 4,500 to 5,000, the most Jews, but a very close community. Life was good. I had no complaints. My mom used to help my father on the business. I always admired my father, but he came through when the need was there. Germany went to war with Russia, divided Europe. I was occupied by the Russians from 1939 to 41. My father was clever enough right away to realize that if he doesn't hide his merchandise from the store, the Russians will call him bourgeois and send him to Siberia. That might have been right at the time, but he didn't think so. So he hid all his merchandise and the store was empty. So when the Russians came in, not a problem, they gave him a job. Life continued on just as good, not really much changes. In 1941, June of 1941, the Germans walked into Holocaust. They gathered all the Jews in the center on the Rinnig, just like you here, and dehumanizing us and giving us orders. My father was holding me and my sister and squeezing our hands. We should keep quiet. When we come back to the apartment, my father says to Mom, we're not going to make it. None of us will make it unless we are vigilant and look around, snoop around, but the most important, we're going to need help from our neighbors. He was right. He was lucky he got a job working in the lumber yard, and there were neighbors that he knew all his life. My father was very liked in the neighborhood. He was respected and liked, and they did tell him when the first big aktia will come. He had time enough to make a hiding place for us all to make it. However, right after the aktia, the Germans said they used language of deceptions, and they said they're going to relocate the remaining Jews from Chodorov to the big city Lvov, which had a big ghetto. And my father comes home and tells it to my mom. He says, we are not going. I don't believe them. That was the first right step, not to believe them. The remaining of my mom's family was still alive. They said, no, they're going to go to Lvov. It's a big city. They'll work there. My father says, no, I'm not going. What are we going to do? He says, I'm going to look for something I don't know. He's looking and looking, comes home one day. He says, I found a woman. Her name is Stephanie Struck. She'll hide us. And then he asks who else wants to come. My mom's sister, two smaller, younger children, and my grandmother was still alive, my mom's grandma. And we said, we're all going to go together. So where do you hide us? Every house in Europe has a barn in the back. So he says, we'll divide the barn a little smaller. He made a division of 4 feet by 4 feet, 9 people just to sleep. And he gives her money to buy livestock, so she can have an excuse to come to the barn to bring food for us. So she buys a pig and chickens. And the women and children went into hiding earlier. The men waited for the very last minute, and when they started picking up the people to put them on the train, my uncle and my father came to the hiding place. It didn't take maybe 2 weeks. Stephanie comes to us and tells us there isn't a single Jew left in Chodorov. Chodorov had Jews for hundreds of years. Sit still. Of course we're sitting still. There was nothing we could do there. It's pitch dark. We can't see, we can't read, we can't even sit together. So one of these days, each one of us would stand in the middle of the barn and stretch their legs. Maybe 3 months into the hiding place, Stephanie opens the big barn door, standing there, looking at us with a Ukraine police right next to her. She freezes when she sees us. Okay, and the barn is pitch dark. Outside is very sunny. The pig and chicken started running towards the door. The policeman didn't know there are Jews there or anyone is there except the animals he was about to check. But she saw us standing. She got frightened, closes the door, comes back an hour later and says, you have to leave. I'm sorry, I can't take chances keeping you here. We beg her, go talk to him, nothing doing. I'm leaving the door open, I'm giving you 2 nights. Well, we have to leave, we have to leave. What do? My father says, my father was, by the way, the leader of all of us. So he says to us, we'll try to run to the forest. But the very last minute, he decides, my sister was older, 4.5 years than I was 8.5, she was 12.5 or 13. So he says to my sister, from now on, you take Toby's hand and you take care of her. And he gives her a piece of paper with 2, 3 addresses to which door to knock on. He's sure that these people will take us in to hide. 2 little girls they'll take in. He says, but remember, we all going to the forest. I know the war will end, but I don't know when. If we don't come back, you to make sure that I'm sorry, you know what, I speak once a week, but every time I talk about this incident, I can't help but relive it. He says to her, but if we don't come back, you make sure, when the war ends, to look for survivors, or they will look for you, and to leave this place. As we are saying goodbye, the door opens up. Stephanie had 2 children, a daughter and a son. The son was 16 years old. His name was Tajik. Tajik opens up the door. He says, my name is Tajik. You're not going anywhere. I will help my mom. Together, maybe we can save you. I guess she changed her mind. She could not chase us out. By the way, we did not give her much money. We didn't have any. She didn't do it for money. So he says, I will make a better hiding place. We went up to the attic, made the place much bigger, much more comfortable. We could stand, we could sit, we could walk a little bit. There we stayed almost 2 years, short a couple of weeks. Time goes fast. Only when you're happy, time goes very slow, 2 years. We had mice, lice, rats, but nothing mattered. The most thing that mattered is the hunger. I still feel hungry. Not really. But I never go without food any place. I can't forget that nudge in case I get hungry. I don't allow myself to get hungry. My father was very positive. He never changed, his religion never changed by him. He continued what he knew how to do, which was davening, making sure, teaching us the alphabet, making sure to know we know who we are, and making sure that he used to say, somebody has to survive. No way is everybody going to die. We have to tell the world. Maybe it will be us. He was very positive, always something good to say. Sure enough, the war ended in 1940. I'm not going to give you details in hiding because it's too long of a story. We made it. That's the main important thing. In 1944, June of 1944, the Russians walked in and we were liberated. None of us could walk or talk. You know, we didn't cry, we didn't talk, we just looked at each other. Is it possible? The Russian young soldier said, yes, it's possible, but don't eat. If you eat, you will all die. That was again a miracle. My father found places for us to be nourished. We separated. We went to another woman. I'll never forget the first bath she gave us. And then she nurtured us every morning a little bit of food till we were able to get out. We're anxious to get out to see who survived. 31 people survived in Khodorov. None of them came back from Lvov. And what we did find out is that they put the remaining Jews on the train, took them outside of Khodorov, and shot them all. My father was right. He did not believe them. We stayed in Khodorov till 1945. When the war ended, we tried to get out, and sure enough, as he told us will happen, Jews came looking for survivors. They were picking up survivors like from the ashes, each corner. And we came over to the American zone with the help from the organizations, whoever it was, but it was Jews. I wound up in the DP camps in Austria, Abelsberg. They are 45 to 49. Well, let me tell you, there was the best years of my life. We were free. We were hiking. I learned to ride a bike. I learned to walk. I learned to talk. We had school right away. Make sure that the kids are being taught. We stayed there till 1949. 49, the doors opened up, and we decided to go to the United States. There again, he said, I'm not going north where everybody else is going. I'm going south. Why are you going south? He remembered that the Russian immigrants came to the south, they all became peddlers. I hope everybody knows what a peddler is. Well, he was right. So we went to New Orleans. Well, let me tell you, the experience when I came to New Orleans is beyond to describe. The excitement, when this big, huge General Black is going down the Mississippi, the boat was General Black, an army boat, going down the Mississippi. And I see the lights and the people and the cars and the excitement. And everybody's excited. We're finally making our way to begin life. Sure enough, this woman picks us up. My name is Mrs. Bronick. Picks us up from the boat. It's a big, huge Cadillac. Takes us to the Jewish Center, which was enormous. I thought it was the White House. And food I have never seen in my whole entire life. Again, I'm saying the Jews were there to help. We came just September before Rosh Hashanah. So my father says, I need a kosher meal and I need an Orthodox shul. She says, no problem. We had it. This woman helped us settle in. Took about 3 months. We were in. My father had a job, got a job. I registered to school. My sister had to work. Things went smooth. My parents always corresponded with Stephanie, but we had nothing to give her, nothing to help her. The first dollar we got in New Orleans, we started working, we asked her, what do you need? Material. She said material, because that's what you need in Europe. This material went a long way. We did what we saw. My parents always did what was right for her. When my parents passed away and my sister, I took over. I went back to see, make contact. I made contact with her great-granddaughter. I'm still in touch with them. My biggest charity is them. That part of life it was horrible, but the end was great. We appreciated greatly what this country offered us. My sister and I got married and we moved to New York. My parents stayed on and my father did become a peddler and he loved it, stayed on for many, many years on. I raised 2 children, both highly educated professionals. I have 4 beautiful grandchildren, all Jewish, and a little great-grandson. What more can I ask for? Life is good. Okay, now I'm going to go back to tell you how that's when I realized, I retired, I realized I have something to do. I knocked on the door to the museum, and they took me in and taught me whatever I tried to do, gave me guidance, how to teach, how to walk, and I do a great job with the kids. I want to give you 2 examples. I speak once a week, 50 kids, sometimes 200 kids. I like the higher grades. Recently, I had in the museum, I go to schools or in the museum, there was maybe 50 kids, immigrants, hardly speaking English, so they were shy to ask questions. So I tried to get them involved, and I tried to tell them what life is and so forth, and this young man stands up, comes over and gives me a hug, and says, tell me, how did you do it? How is it possible? I said, it's not easy, but it's possible. My father taught me not to hate. You have to remember, but don't hate. That's a very good lesson because hate will destroy you, he used to say. not the one that you hate. So if you don't hate and you work hard and you think positive every day, you can make it. He gave me a hug and a kiss. He says, I have a lesson that I have to go forward. That is it. One more example. A young girl asks me, did you ever want revenge? I says, I have my revenge. I'm here. I'm enjoying life. Life is great. I have children, grandchildren, all Jewish. Hitler did not succeed. Not only are we here, but we're thriving. Look at me. A couple of weeks later, I get a letter from her. She's saying, you taught me a great lesson. I never knew that you can have revenge without killing. To me, it was a good feeling. Now I want to thank the first and second and third generation for going forward just the way I just heard a minute ago. I appreciate what you do, and I hope that you will remember to do it. We just celebrated Passover, the Exodus from Egypt, and we thrived. Now this should be a similar lesson. We should know to meet once a year to remember. We must remember. If we do it every year, you will teach the children, they will remember. This is our second freedom. And this time we have our own Israel. And we don't need visas to go there. Thank you for listening. And I want you all to be my witness. Thank you. I hope I didn't do too much. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Toby. It's an honor to have you with us today. The Temple Emmanuel Choir will sing Ani Ma'amin as 36 women survivors of the Holocaust light memorial candles. They are accompanied by 36 young people, many of whom are children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and active members of the many young Jewish leadership groups volunteering and participating today.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to recognize our significant and continuing partnership with the Consul General of Israel in New York, Danny Dayan. We are so pleased to welcome Danny and a number of other dignitaries to the temple today, including the Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of Romania, Anna Birchall, Consul General of Romania in New York, Caitlin Radu Dancu, Consul General of Germany in New York, David Gill, Public Advocate Tish James, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, Council Member Margaret Chin, and Council Member Helen Rosenthal. On behalf of the museum, thank you for joining us for this commemoration. It is now my pleasure to ask Ambassador Danny Dayan to join us and offer remarks.
Madam Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much for your presence. It means a lot for us. We remember. Oh yes, we remember. Maybe one day we will find the strength and the will to forgive, but we will never, ever forget. I want to recall today two persons, a survivor and the persons that saved her life, and the victim and those who murdered him. We will never forget. To this very day, we remember those that helped us leave Egypt millennia ago, and those that attacked us in the desert. To this very day, we remember the countries that expelled our Jewish communities, and we remember the countries that embraced Jewish communities with open arms. To this very day, we remember the countries that voted after the Holocaust for the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel, and the countries that opposed. We remember, and we will remember forever. And we will also remember forever with gratitude the few that endangered their lives in order to save Jews, and the many, too many, individuals, organizations, and governments that collaborated with the Nazi beast. I want to raise today the memory of two. I want to raise the memory of Teresa Tucholska, a survivor. She wasn't born with that name. She was born in Cheglov with the name of Chaya Esterstein. Her whole family, her father, her mother, her sister Yocheved, were killed by the Nazis. And the righteous among the nations, Irena Sandler, took her and saved her. As an employee of the Social Welfare Department, Irena had a special permit to enter the Warsaw Ghetto to check for signs of typhus, a disease the Germans feared would spread beyond the ghetto and maybe attack their own forces. She used that permit to smuggle out babies and small children, sometimes in ambulances, in trams, sometimes hiding them inside packages and suitcases, and using various other means. In October 1943, Irena Sandler was arrested by the Gestapo. As they ransacked her house, she managed to pass the list of the children she saved to a friend that was not searched. The Gestapo beat Sandler brutally upon her arrest. Her legs, her feet fractured. She didn't betray the children she saved. She was sentenced to death, Still, she went silent. Her friends at the Zhegota bribed the guard, and she escaped. And she continued to save Jewish children. Irena Sandler, in addition to Chaya Esther Stein, that became, to be saved, Teresa Tucholska, saved 2,500 Jewish children. The non-diplomat individual that saved more Jews during the days of the Holocaust. For an incomprehensible reason, or maybe comprehensible, the Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee refused to award her a Nobel Peace Prize. We must remember with eternal gratitude the few, the very few, like Irena Sandler, a Polish citizen that saved so many Jews. The second person I want to recall, his name is, no, actually we don't know his name. We only know the number that was tattooed on his arm in Auschwitz, B2969. Technically, B2969 survived the Holocaust, survived Auschwitz, but only technically, because he found after the Holocaust an apparent safe haven in the Polish village of Kielce, in a house that in Planty Street number 7, in which Jews that barely escaped the Holocaust found shelter. But then, on the 4th of July, 1946, Polish thugs, incited by a blood label, entered the place. First it was the civil militia, the Polish civil militia and soldiers, then joined by 600 workers from the steel mill, Polish steel workers. And they murdered 42 Holocaust survivors. Most of them were identified. B2969 had no surviving relative. No person could identify who he was, this murdered Jew. What is his name? To this very day, we don't know. Among the slain Jews in Kielce, 9 were shot to death. 2 were killed with bayonets. The rest beaten or stoned to death. 2 Jewish people not residing at Planty Street dwelling were also murdered on this day in Kielce in separate incidents. Regina Fish and her 3-week-old baby were abducted at their home at 15 Leonarda Street in Kielce by a group of 4 Polish men led by civic militia corporal Stefan Mazur. They were robbed and driven out of the city, where Regina and her baby were shot to death. Wounded Jews being taken to the local hospital were beaten and robbed by soldiers, Polish soldiers, and injured were assaulted in the hospital by other patients. A civilian crowd approached one of the hospitals in Kielce and demanded that the hurt Jews be handed over, but thank God the hospital staff refused. A train passing through Kielce main railway station was scrutinized for Jews by civilians and Polish soldiers, resulting in at least 2 additional Jews being murdered. As I said, we will forever remember with gratitude the Irena Sandlers that risked their lives to save our brethren. And we will also remember forever those that collaborated with Nazi Germany to kill our brethren. And I can assure you, and I can assure the world, that no legislation passed in any European country will make us forget or forgive.
Thank you, Ambassador Dayan, for joining us today. I would like to invite Cantor Joseph Malavani from the Fifth Avenue Synagogue to sing Moshe L'Shloimelech, accompanied by Zalman Motek. The translation can be found on page 5 in your program.
Schwarze Schleimerlach spielen sich mehr nicht kein Sorelach, Lealach, nicht auf kein Gräserlach, nicht auf kein Schnee.
Thank you, Cantor Malavani. While you were singing that song, I can only think of the two children that my mother-in-law and my father-in-law lost in the Holocaust. Yocheved, she was 3.5 years old, and Avrum was 1.5 years old. They were taken away from the Lodz ghetto and gassed in Chelmo. So your song is really relevant to so many of us. The Hazamir International Jewish Teen Choir, directed and founded by Matthew Nazar, will now sing Eli Eli, based on the beautiful poem by Israeli national hero Hannah Senesh. Eli Eli will be followed by the Yugen hymn, accompanied by Zalman Motek on the keyboard.
Our memorial candlelighters are a testament to the strength and dignity that define the medal of Holocaust survivors. Each of these survivors has created a life of meaning. Along with their families, they will light 6 candles in memory of those who perished, and they will be accompanied by the Temple Emmanuel Choir singing Esprent, a poem by Mordechai Geberting that became the anthem of the underground resistance movement. Henry Branch. Henry Branch was born in Lodz, Poland in October 1929 and survived several months in Auschwitz before being transferred to Kofering, a labor camp. Henry endured the death march and was fortunately liberated by the U.S. Army before he reached Dachau. Max Lerner. Maximilian Lerner was born in Vienna in 1924. He and his family escaped to unoccupied France after Austria became controlled under the Third Reich. Max volunteered for the U.S. Army after arriving in New York. He was involved in liberating Paris, Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, and the crossing of the Rhine. Erika Estes witnessed Kristallnacht and was sent to the Kindertransport to England. She never saw her parents again, but was reunited with her sisters in the United States after the war. Eva Melamud survived Theresen. Thanks to the bravery of her mother, she and her family arrived to the United States after the war and settled in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Eva was unable to be with us today. Dr. Harvey Moser. Dr. Harvey Moser was born in Freiburg, Germany in 1928. He left for France with his brother after Kristallnacht and was then on the St. Louis, which was diverted back to Europe after being denied entry to Cuba. They arrived in New York City in 1940, one of the last French boats to leave for the U.S. during the war. Ruth Zimbler. Ruth Zimbler was born in Vienna in 1928. She and her brother watched the destruction of the largest synagogue in Vienna from their apartment during Kristallnacht. Ruth and Walter won the first Kindertransport out of Vienna in December 1938. Ruth and her family eventually made it to New York in late 1939. Please stand. Cantor Melavani will chant the El Malei Rachamim. We ask that you remain standing for Kaddish B'tzibur, which will be led by Holocaust survivor Saul Rosenkrantz, who recently celebrated his 100th birthday at the Museum of Jewish Heritage.
Heil, Malei, Rachamim, Shochein, Bameroim, Ametzei, Menucha, Nechoeno, Kanefei, Ashechina, Bemailos, Kedoshim, Oteyorim, Kezor, Lenishmois, Shisha Millionei Achenu Ve'ach Yoseinu Anashim Nashim Votov Shenergo Veshenishchatu Veshenechneku Veshenisrefo Chaim Aval Kiddush Hashem B'machanos ha'ashmada Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, Majdanek, Mauthausen, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Ghetto Warschau, Ghetto Vilna, ומקומות אחרים באירופה בידי הצוררים, הגרמנים, הנאצים ויוזריהם משאר העמים, יימח שמם וזכרם. ושיערכו לעולמו בעבור שכל עם ישראל מתפללים מתפללים אלינו נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם לכם בר ולחמים יסתירם בססר כנפיו לימים ויצרור בצרו החיים אס נשמו יסייהם אדוני נחל הסם ויקומו לקיץ הימים לחיו ויסום
Yiskadal v'yiskada shemei rabo.
Amen.
Yalmod evrocherisei v'yamluch mochesei. V'chayechon evamechon v'chayedachol beis Yisrael. Ba'agolo v'zman kore v'yimro omein.
Amen. Yehi shemei rabo mevorach leolam ulolmei olmaya.
Yehi shemei rabo mevorach leolam yolmayo. Yisborach v'yishtabach v'yisbor. V'yisramom, v'yisnaseh, v'yishador, v'yishaleh, v'yishalol shmar girish u'brichu. Le'elu min kol berchuso, v'shiruso, v'tishbachuso, v'nechamoso, d'amirom v'yolmo v'yomro omein. Yehei shlomo rabo, min shemayo, v'chayim volenu, v'yal kol Yisrael v'yomro omein. Osei shalom emramo, v'yaseh shalom volenu, v'yal kol Yisrael v'yomro omein.
Please be seated. It is traditional at this point during the commemoration for us to pause for a moment of silence. We send a message with our silence that we shall never forget the lives lost during the Holocaust. nor will we forget the stories we have learned from those who survived. We pledge to make our world a safer and more peaceful one. Please rise for a moment of silence and remain standing to join the cantor and the Hazamir International Jewish Teen Choir in singing the Partisans Hymn.
This marks the end of our commemoration. On behalf of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, thank you for joining with us today.